Alex Eala's rise brings a new kind of pressure and a lesson in tennis expanding reach. Melbourne. The first sign that something had shifted came hours before the match. Fans lined up early at an outer court, some holding Philippine flags, others refreshing their phones as security warned that capacity was limited. By the time Alex Eala walked onto Court 6 at the Australian Open, hundreds more were already being turned away. This was not a scene reserved for seated stars or night session headliners. It was a reality of a player whose popularity has begun to outpace the assumptions of tournament scheduling and, at moments, the insulation athletes depend on to compete. Eala's first round loss in Melbourne ended quickly on the draw sheet. Its implications lingered longer. A breakout moment compressed into an outer court. Eala arrived at Melbourne Park as the Philippines' most visible tennis export, her ascent tracked closely by a global Filipino audience that has waited decades for representation at the sport's highest level. The turnout for her match reflected that pent-up demand, colliding with a tournament already straining under record attendance across its opening days. Organizers temporarily paused ground pass sales as crowds surged through gates. Walkways bottlenecked. Outer courts filled beyond expectation. In that environment, Eala's match became a focal point not only for fans, but for a broader question facing modern tennis: how to allocate space when attention shifts faster than rankings. The mismatch was operational. It was also psychological. When support reshapes the competitive environment. After the match, Eala spoke with composure and candor. She acknowledged that the volume of support intensified the experience and made the loss harder to absorb, precisely because she knew how many people had come to watch her. Practices, she said, drew unexpected crowds. The attention was affirming. It was also unfamiliar. Tennis players are trained to manage pressure in private. A break point, a service game, a tiebreak, public expectation, especially when it arrives suddenly and at scale, introduces a different variable. It does not change technique. It changes context. Eala did not suggest that the crowd caused her defeat. She framed the week as a lesson in prominence, in attention, in the realities of being watched, a sport adjusting to its own growth. Veterans recognize the moment immediately. Novak Djokovic, asked about congestion and scheduling, called the situation a good problem to have. Packed courts and excess demand, he said, are signs of a sport extending beyond its traditional centers, even if logistics struggle to keep pace. Jessica Pegula echoed the sentiment, noting that players who attract new audiences strengthen tennis in the long term, even when tournaments are forced to recalibrate in real time. Their comments were not defenses of inconvenience. They were acknowledgments of transition. Tennis, long governed by predictable hierarchies of attention, is now contending with players whose cultural pull cannot be measured by seeding alone. A learning curve for player and public. For Filipino fans, Eala's week in Melbourne was both affirmation and education. Elite tennis careers are not built on moments alone, but on accumulation. Matches played, losses processed, routines refined. Visibility accelerates none of that. It complicates it. The crowds that followed Eala reflected her rising profile. They also underscored the responsibility that comes with being a standard bearer, managing expectation, protecting focus, and converting attention into sustained performance are skills learned over time, often under far quieter circumstances. Eala left Melbourne Park without a second-round appearance. She left with something else. Confirmation that her presence now changes the environment around her, that is not a burden unique to her. It is the cost of relevance in the sport discovering new audiences, and a reminder that growth, even when welcome, rarely arrives without friction.